Hey Jane, how you doing today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you, Kayo. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How's your day been so far?
Good, and it's Friday, which is always good.
Of course, of course. Yeah, so let the viewers know who you are, what you do, and why you do it, Jane.
Yeah, so I'm Jayne Gomez. I'm based in the north of England, in Manchester. I am a qualified positive psychology coach, and I currently coach couples to overcome any manner of relationship issues. And it's something that I'm really, really passionate about.
Excellent, excellent. So, like, how did you get into working with couples, and where did that passion come from? Like, what was your journey to that point?
So, at the age I am now, KO, I've been in marriages for half of my life. I was in a 10-year, really toxic marriage from my early 20s into my early 30s. I eventually managed to get out of that relationship, um, thankfully. I spent a number of years on my own. I found even the thought of getting into another relationship really quite distressing. I did eventually meet my husband, Rick, who I'm married to now, in 2010. Great guy, great marriage, great relationship. And in 2022, as great as our marriage is and was, we experienced an issue with infidelity, and Rick did actually meet a woman. I realised something was going on because of a change in his phone use, which was something for me that triggered that something was wrong. I confronted him about it eventually, and he admitted it. The road from there was very, very rocky. I was blindsided, um, completely emotionally, physically wiped out by it. Did not see it coming. Um, and then, yeah, after a few weeks of trying to navigate that initial situation, we we kind of came to the conclusion that we might want to work at the marriage and try and work through this, which is something that we both decided we wanted. And that was a really challenging time. I myself originally realised it's not something I would be able to do without some support, some professional support to get me through it. I sought some counselling and I had a session with a counsellor. Didn't find it helpful. For me, it was just regurgitating all of the negativity that was going around in my head, and I just didn't find that helpful. So realised that that wasn't the solution for me. We went on after that to Rick wasn't too keen, but he agreed that we would go to and try and get some marriage counselling and see if that would help. Together, we had one marriage counselling session, and that didn't go how either of us would have wanted it to go. Neither of us felt that it was going to help, even during the one session, but even in the longer term, we didn't get out of that. I certainly didn't. I think we both came out of that session more traumatized and despondent than when we went in it. So we also realized that marriage counseling wasn't for us. I then, almost by accident, I came across somebody on social media that was a positive psychology coach. I didn't know anything about coaching, didn't know what coaching was, and I reached out to this lady and just explained my situation to her and asked whether she thought coaching might be something that might help me. She said, I'm happy to jump on a call. We jumped on a call. I had around 3 months worth of coaching with that lady at the end of 2022, and it completely was transformational in terms of my outlook, my mindset, the way I'd been living my life and the way I'd been seeing things. And it was that experience that helped me to get through what had happened in my marriage. It helped me to do the things that I needed to do to rebuild the relationship and repair. Um, so much so, it was such a profound experience that I knew whilst I was working with this lady that this is what I want to do. I want to qualify to be a coach, and I want to work with couples who are in situations that I was in, to get them through, because there isn't just light at the other side of that. There's it's wonderful. I have a marriage now. I've been married to Rick 14 years at the end of this year, and my marriage is better than it ever was, and it was always good before it. So it's powerful, and that's my journey into coaching, and that's my journey into coaching couples. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah, that's a fascinating journey that you've been on there. So, looking at your first marriage, when you said it was toxic, I'm not sure how much of it you want to share, but what would you say made it toxic?
I was young, he was slightly older than me, and probably from early on into the relationship, there was a realization that there was coercive control, more or less, through all of it. So I married that man and had a son with that man within the first year of meeting him. Um, and I quickly realised, but being young in my early 20s and having a son, I couldn't see a way out of it. And I did eventually get out of that. But in the meantime, I think I lost a lot of my own elements of me. The coercive control, which interestingly enough now it's a crime. It wasn't at the time I was. It is a criminal offence. It was difficult for me to open up and share and speak to anybody, particularly family and friends. Some of my close friends knew what was going on. But yeah, I think it chipped away at everything that was me over the 10 years I was married to that man. And when I did eventually leave him, I knew I had a lot of emotional recovery to do. I was not in a good place in the 4 years. I was on my own after that divorce. But I did manage to rebuild. I had some counselling then. I had a few months worth of counselling on the NHS, which did help. But I felt like I needed to go through a grieving process with that after that relationship to come to terms with what I'd been through while I was in it, and to try and establish what my life might look like now I was out of it. And that was actually helpful, KO. It was helpful. And the way I would describe that counselling was, if you imagine my brain, or your brain is like a room, and everything was thrown all over the room. There was no order, no organisation, and everything was a mess. The counselling that I had at that time almost allowed me to put things away in boxes in my head and almost grieve, accept, acknowledge what I'd been through, but put it away in places where it could stay there and allow me to move on. So I did find that really useful.
Right, right. So, like going into your second marriage, would you say that like it was a less controlling the situation that you was in with that? I know there was infidelity, but was there
Mm.
like a sense of like not as much control? Uh,
Yeah, yeah. So to be honest, I was very, very fearful of getting into another relationship. It's something that I did have a major fear around, and wasn't actually something I was intentionally looking for. And when I met Rick, the biggest thing that I realized is I looked for a long time for the negative but. Like, he's a nice guy, but, and I think had I picked up on anything that didn't sit right with me, I would not have pursued that, because I was so damaged from such a toxic marriage. So there was no control. Rick and I have always had a really good, solid, happy, healthy relationship. And it was the only way I could go into another relationship. I couldn't compromise on my own mental health and well-being. I couldn't sell myself short for another marriage or another relationship, and I didn't. And the infidelity thing, I'm not apportioning any blame onto Rick, but I know conclusively that for us, it came from, and I'm very, very passionate about this, KO. we had a healthy, happy marriage, but because it was almost okay, we kind of kept putting the marriage to the bottom of the priority list when other things, life, work, jobs, kids. And I term that now as relationship complacency, and that's where we was. And that for me is what I realise now, that allowed a situation where Rick was out on a night out and for him to have his head turned by somebody else, because whilst there was nothing really terrible going on at home, there was nothing really amazing going on in our relationship. And we were just a little bit for that period, a little bit like roommates, a little bit
Right.
like people that shared a house, but it wasn't toxic. There was no major arguing. There was nothing like that going on. We were just coasting in an okay marriage. And I realize, and I'm really passionate about highlighting this with other couples, the blind spots and the dangers of just being okay and being all right with being okay in your relationship and not intentionally putting the effort in that they need, that your relationship and a healthy, happy relationship needs.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's interesting that you mentioned a relationship complacency because a lot of people, when they get into a relationship, they think they've now met the person, but it never actually ends. It's like the dating process is still within a relationship and a marriage. And when you get complacent in that kind of a situation,
Yeah.
people start to look for that type of energy elsewhere if they're not getting it at home. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And for me, that is the thing. That is what happened. And that is speaking from somebody that's been in a really toxic, unhealthy relationship and then to experience a really happy, healthy relationship and for that to still happen because you do think, I think some couples fall into the trap where if nothing major is happening in terms of conflict and connection and communication that causes you to reevaluate and reassess and think we need to do some work here, it's a dangerous blind spot to be in because you then fall into that where you drift unintentionally and sometimes without even realizing it, you drift apart. And I can see 2 years on, that's where we were. And that's where that was the shock to the system that meant we both had to look at ourselves as individuals, look at our marriage and think, where do we go from here? And where we went from there was putting the work and time and effort in, not just to repair it, but to work on it, to nurture it, to never be in a situation where we found ourselves in that place again. And that's still that's still what we aspire to every day.
Right, right. And you also mentioned that when you went for marriage coaching, marriage counseling, that didn't work out for you. It wasn't until you done it as an individual, when you got coached individually, that it was transformational. Why do you think that was? Like, why it didn't work as a couple and it worked individually?
So I think there's a couple of reasons to that, KO. I think one of them was when I look back at it now and I look at my formal coach training and I look at the differences and the comparables between coaching and counseling and therapy and things like that, I could see that the marriage counseling session that we went into, she was looking more at a top level. She put us into an exercise that involved us talking about small things that irritated us. And I could see now when I look back on it, this was a technique that she was using to try and build connection between us. But at the time, the immediate help we needed wasn't to reconnect again. It was to try and work through. For me, I felt like she didn't read the room. She knew before we got there that I was struggling to overcome the fact that my husband had been unfaithful and we needed to work through that. So this little exercise that she did wasn't what either of us needed. Rick felt really guilty. I could see that Rick felt really guilty that he was having to go through, we were having to go through this exercise when that wasn't the help that we needed. When I look at the coaching that I had and the way coaching is derived from positive psychology, it is far more solution focused and working on finding a solution to that problem as opposed to focusing on that problem. And I think that's, for me, the thing that unlocked emotional freedom and a sense of being able to myself work through it and work through the things that I needed to myself. And for me then to be able to show up in the relationship and with Rick the way I wanted to. I found that really, really profound, really profound. And I think one of the things that I also realised, Kayo, which is really worth noting, and something else that I'm passionate about, is because of the emotional strain that the issue had put on me, once we got to a stage where we felt like we wanted to work through it, I came to recognise that I was starting to sabotage that process because of the emotional turmoil that I was in. So I came to realise that regardless of what is going on, and I'm really passionate about this, regardless of what is going on in a relationship, it is up to us as an individual to create the positive change that we want to see in our relationships, not our partners. Because I'd fallen into a trap of thinking, Rick has done this thing to me. Rick needs to make that better. Rick's done it. I haven't done it. He's done it. But then I realised with the coaching that no, I've got some personal responsibility here. We are working towards a common goal, which is to save our marriage. And I need to do my bit to make sure that that happens because that's what we both want.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Finding solutions is always a better step way forward than hammering down on problems, and really taking that responsibility to do what you need to do to find that solution rather than
Yeah,
shifting blame, like is
yeah,
the best we can do. We can't always speak for the other person or make them do something, but we can control what we do going forward. So yeah, yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. Now, looking at
absolutely.
people like women, for example, like that they immerse themselves in their professional career, right?
Yeah,
To the point that they have now become complacent, like you mentioned earlier, in their
yeah,
personal relationship. So they
yeah.
now struggle to bridge the gap between being focused on their career and not
Mm.
being so complacent in their relationship because they don't want their relationship to suffer. In what
Mm.
ways do you think they can move forward and really still have that balance of like their professional life and their personal life and not making that complacent, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's an interesting one that, and I think it's a similar approach and a similar tact. And the way I make this comparable is for men and women, not just women. I think we have career aspirations and we have goals within our careers and things that we want to achieve. And we don't show up in our workplaces just giving the bare minimum and giving the bare minimum of ourselves and what we are capable of and expect to climb a career ladder and reach and achieve career goals that we want to because somewhere in our common psyche we know that that is not going to get us where we want to be. And I think we need to be applying the exact same logic to our relationships, same as in business, same as in careers. You have to put the work in to get out of it what you want. And just because you've made a choice to come together and be together and build a life together doesn't mean the work is done once you've met each other. And it's far from it. And it's very stressful and traumatic if one or both of you in that relationship is applying that logic. And it's very stressful and traumatic when it then goes wrong.
Right,
It
right.
really is, to a point where there's either a lot of work needed to try and come back from that, or you're not able to come back from that. Now, the ripple effect there in the rest of your life between careers, businesses, children is insurmountable. It is insurmountable. And I think what we lose sight of is it's far easier and far more fulfilling to put the work in at the front end than to try to put the work in at the back end when it's potentially too late.
Right, right, right. Now you speak to a lot of different people, like when you the people that you coach and everything. Like,
Mm.
what would you say was the biggest cause of the anxiety that they find within their relationships that they go through, from what you've experienced and what you've heard? What would you say is the common thing that keeps being repeated in what they say is the problem that causes anxiety for them?
The biggest one, overarching, is communication. It's either a lack of communication or it's communication styles that just lead more often than not to conflict. And intertwined in that chaos, there's also issues around second guessing and assuming because we aren't communicating properly to start with. So when you are not understanding each other, that's when the misunderstandings and wondering and making assumptions and getting the wrong idea and paranoia and all these things just get magnified. They get magnified. And I think a lack of communication can sometimes, or a continuous or habitual lack of communication, can be the death knell eventually in a relationship failing, because you need to be able to speak to each other, understand each other, be honest, open with each other, trust each other, and without it, it's the main foundation of a relationship that keeps the longevity, that keeps it there.
Yeah, yeah, it is definitely the foundation of every relationship, good communication. But at
Absolutely.
times, like there are things that someone might want to communicate that they're not sure that their partner is going to be on board with. For example, like if someone's in a monogamous relationship, but they
Yeah.
are interested in like exploring non-monogamy, for example, but they're like,
Yeah.
how am I going to communicate this kind of thing to my partner? Am I going to destroy my relationship if I bring it up? Like, in your opinion, how could someone communicate this type of thing that is kind of foreign to their relationship, but that they're interested in?
So I think that it comes from being able to build an open, honest trust within your relationship to start with. I don't believe, Kale, that that is something that you can just approach if the solid foundations of trust and communication are not there to start with. And I think that's where it comes from: honesty and openness, and also valuing valuing the other person as an individual, valuing each other as individuals, not just the way you see things, has to be a big part of that communication, because we can be good communicators all we want all day long, but if you're only looking to get out of the other person the way you see things, that is not true, honest, and open communication. So I think it's about both understanding the similarities and the difference between those individual people and factoring that into all of your communication, not expecting, not forcing, not forcing conversations that you want to hear. It's both being honest and open and being able to share your own view and your own view of the world,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
a view that the other person might
yeah.
want to hear or see.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned valuing your partner, right? So, like,
Yeah.
for example, if someone like wants to have that conversation, but like, let's say their partner is like not on board with it, and because they value their partner, they're like, okay,
Mhm.
we're not gonna go down that road because like you're not on board with it. But like
Yeah.
at the same time, they're suppressing their desire. Do you think it's a good idea to suppress your desire because of the value you have for your partner, or is it time to take a look at yourself and see if it's time for you to move on? Or what is your opinion on that situation?
Yeah, I think you need to be more understanding of, I think it's outcomes driven. I mean, that is a big, you shouldn't compromise your own dreams and goals at the expense of what somebody else wants. That's not living, and that's not living true authentically to yourself. This is clearly quite a topic that it's a difficult one to navigate, and it goes without saying that it navigating that could be at the expense of the relationship
Right,
overall.
right, right.
Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
so would you say that it is important to just be true to yourself and be honest with like your true desire, because in the long run, Like it could have other effects if you don't, or what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think within a relationship, you both have to have that support and respect for each other. And I think there's a dynamic there that you are fracturing certainly some of that respect in the other person by sharing that, and depending on the outcome of the conversations of sharing that, whatever decisions you make, because I think, yeah, trust and respect
Right, right.
are again major foundations in a relationship.
Right, okay. So looking at brand new relationships now, like when someone gets into a brand new relationship, they're very excited about this new relationship. There's a lot of chemistry. They're feeling a lot of butterflies to the point that they really want to immerse themselves into this new relationship. But some
Yeah.
people, upon immersing themselves in a new relationship, they tend to lose their sense of self in that
Mm,
process. So,
mm.
in your opinion, how can people immerse themselves in a new relationship without necessarily losing their sense of self in the process?
Yeah, I do. I think it's around, and I don't mean strike the balance. I think we should always pursue and continue to value and have the importance of our own goals and dreams. And I think where the key to relationship success lies is when you can both, as individuals, support and respect and honour your partner's individual life aspirations as well as your own. I think that's massive, because you're right, it is easy to, particularly in the beginning, yeah, to even change things we feel about ourselves, change our values, change our opinions of things, because we feel the other person wants to. But I think you do find respect, um, true respect and regard for each other if you can. I think it also plays into sort of like personalities and attachment styles, to be able to honour your partner's individual goals and dreams, whether that's career, whether that's hobbies, whether that's bigger life goals, without feeling threatened yourself. That's a really great way to show up in your relationship.
Yeah, yeah. And I also say like a lot of people immerse themselves because they've been looking for their other half and they feel like they found their other half.
Mm.
What is your viewpoint or your thoughts on people that feel like they need to find their other half? Do you think that shows that they haven't seen themselves as a whole, or do you think do you think that's a good thing for people to uh, find someone that they feel is their other half?
I think the key, or one of the biggest drivers in a successful relationship, is feeling whole yourself as a person to start with. I think if I think that can cause problems with potentially attachment styles, and issues around feeling threatened. If you are entering into a relationship, into a new relationship, because you need somebody else in your life, I think that is an automatic, for me personally, a red flag in terms of some work that might be needed for one or both parties, um, to reframe and rethink and restructure those thought processes, because somewhere in there they may not be truly healthy.
Right, right, right. So, what would you suggest someone do if they're going through that kind of point where like they're not sure if they're whole as a person, but they've met someone new? Does that mean that they shouldn't pursue that relationship and take time for themselves, or can they work on themselves whilst being in this new relationship?
Yeah, I think something I'm a big fan of, and it's partly just because of the way I live my life. I do a lot of meditation. I like mindfulness. And something that really helps in life is awareness. If you can be aware of your behavior the way that you're behaving and the impact that that might have on others, I think that's key. And that's as individuals and in relationships. I think that's key because self-awareness, you can do something about it. I think the danger lies in if you're not aware, or it then starts to cause tension and friction and pushing other people away. But we're all only human and there's none of us perfect. And we all behave and have habits and things that we do that are different to other people. But I think if you've got the level of awareness to think, is this healthy? Is this the way I want to be behaving? Is this the way I want to be seen by others? Then you're definitely heading in the right direction. So it doesn't necessarily is as black and white as perhaps we need to call this a day till I've done some work on myself. But if you've got the awareness to know I need to do some work on myself because I've just displayed a behaviour there that I really wasn't happy with.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So Jayne, like it's been great speaking with you. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for everything that you shared.
Thanks.
Where could people find you, find out more about you, and find out more about what you do?
So I'm predominantly on LinkedIn at the moment. So head over to my LinkedIn is just my name, Jayne Gomez, Jayne with a Y, Jayne Gomez. I'm currently running a 3 month couples coaching program. That's called Grow Together and Not Apart. Yeah, have a look across my socials, have a look at what I do. I'm happy to have informal, more formal chats with anybody that would want to speak to me, get any advice. Yeah, it's something I'm really passionate about, that we nurture and really live our relationship life to the fullest and not just yeah, expect them just to be.
Yeah, yeah. And for the viewers, all of that information will be in the description so you can get in touch with Jayne and find out more about what she does. Once again, Jayne, thank you so much for coming on. Any final words before we wrap up?
Yeah, just be aware that you are the changes that you want to see in your life and your relationships, not other people.
Excellent. Thank you, Jayne.
Oh, thanks, Kayo.